So all pop culture has taught us is like, sales is just like this thing where you have to force people to spend money on something where like the value is not there. And I think also just as women, the idea of like selling something or making money is probably not what society wants us to do anyways. Hi, I'm Jordan.
And I'm Sarah, and we're both successful serial entrepreneurs who believe the world is way better with more. More women-owned businesses, more wealth, more magic, and more champagne. But before we can add more, we need to return old business ideas that are taking up too much space in our lives.
Enter The Refund, our content series for folks who are looking to return old storylines, concepts, and habits that no longer serve their life and business. Each episode, we're going to cover one topic, share 3 key takeaways, and we're going to receive a refund on what is no longer fitting the bill. Hashtag no receipts required.
Listen and watch The Refund on YouTube and wherever you love to listen to podcasts.
It's a lot of layers.
Totally.
To this.
Direct correlation to the garbagey, generational, financial trauma that women have suffered and been subject to and have had to try really hard just to come to terms with.
Right.
We deserve money. We can earn money.
Right.
We literally can have money.
Right.
Like
we're allowed to
have
charge
it.
what we believe we are valued. And I think also too, there's this perception that like you have to like turn into somebody to be in sales or like put on a perception that like you're selling something. We all know that sales voice when you walk into a store. We've all been that person at one point where we're like, can I help you with something? Like we just turn something on. And there's like, sales are not a bad thing. Sales to me is you're solving a problem. And as service-based businesses, product-based businesses, how is it slimy if you're solving someone's problem? If it's true what you're doing and if it's authentic and you know what you're selling and the value is there, that to me is you're just solving a problem. You're not really selling something to somebody.
So today we can return the notion that sales are slimy or that it's gross.
Or that you're not supposed to, you can't be good at it.
You can't be good at sales.
How dare you?
I really like that because I think a lot of women probably do feel like I'm not good at sales.
Oh, I'm not good at sales. Oh, I'm just a designer. I'm just creative. I can't, because it means you have to promote yourself and you have to sell your services. It means you have to be in the spotlight.
That is a really good way that you just simplified sales. You're promoting yourself or you're promoting your product. Or even if you're an influencer on social media, like you're promoting your story or there's promotion that happens.
Yes, you're solving something for somebody.
Right.
But it involves you, and if you're not confident in what you're offering or what you're solving for, that's why it feels icky. Because you feel like you're either selling yourself short or it's just not clear on who you're talking to.
So you are would you say natural saleswoman? Because you just like, to me, you just evoke this vibe of like, I can fucking sell you anything. And I'm going to look at you and be like, I'll buy it. Okay. Like you just have this in you from my perspective. Is that something that you worked on or is that something that feels are sales natural to you? Is this a natural skill set or is this a learned skill set?
Thank you. I don't know. I feel like, I'm a closer. Like
you're a closer.
I love to close. I'm energized by sales.
That show is about you, the closer.
Yes, closers are for coffee.
Is that a show, actually?
I don't think so, but I just agreed. It is
okay,
now.
Thank you.
It is now.
I can speak confidently enough that you're like, yeah, it is. The show The Closer is about me. I do think it's a show on like ABC or something.
But I honestly think sales is like, I don't know if it's like a natural thing. It's probably like a culmination of work experiences that I've had that include a lot of sales, or that it's you're forced to.
You needed to.
Right. Think about like working in a restaurant. Like I was a server for a long time and like you have 30 seconds to convince somebody whether or not they're going to buy an expensive bottle of wine from you. And at the time I was 19, I couldn't even drink wine and I was like selling wine like nobody's business because I was driven by like, I want to make good tips. I have to put myself through college. Like I'm going to learn everything about this wine list, even though I'm not drinking any of it.
Totally.
Because I know that the more I give them a good experience, the more it's going to benefit me. I'm solving their problem of having a good night. But you don't think about that when you're serving right away.
No.
Or even working in retail. Like
that feels very mature. That was very mature of you to connect those dots.
Yes. Also, women are old souls, which to me, we just force women to grow up at a young age.
Yeah.
We love our sons, we raise our daughters. So I just was forced into the workforce at a young age, which is not a bad thing. But I worked in a lot of sales-oriented jobs. And I think that's what's just given me my sales acumen. So it's like the actual sales part of like hospitality and retail. And then I worked in the marketing agency world where I watched these companies have really crafted pitches for really big contracts for things that were not physical.
Were you telling, was it you that we were talking about? Somebody from an agency had a client where the agency was creating one email a month for them, and it was a $30,000 a month contract. Was that you?
They were doing emails, and I can't remember how many journeys
Am I like
they were
sharing
building.
too much information?
No, it's okay. We're not saying who they are, but like they would offer, they would be building digital marketing collateral. And
But it was one email.
It was a couple emails. So it was like
okay.
they make a couple, and they were like journeys that took people through them, and 30,000 was low.
Which is, I could argue both sides of that for multiple different reasons,
Agency
right?
world is very...
It's different.
What they sell is...
But that takes a pitch
a
to
really good
explain
pitch.
the value in investing $30,000 for a handful of emails being pushed.
And that's a low dollar amount too for that agency. Like that's a low contract.
Which is-
Again, they have a lot. They had like 50 people on their staff.
Right.
But it's like and what was so amazing about that agency I worked at is they would do this thing once a year where they would close their offices for a full day, put people on teams, and everybody
Hunger
on their
Games.
teams, would have to kill each other. They would have to solve a business problem within the day,
fun.
and they would have to build a product. They would be given money to run a survey to test the customers, and at the end, they would have to pitch the business. And then the idea that would win, they would actually put dollars behind it to build the product. So I was also in this environment too, outside of the hospitality industry, the agency world, where they were teaching you how to solve a business problem and then present it in a way where people are like, yes, we need this, the story's good, the problem is clear, and the market is telling you that.
What an interesting skill set developer.
Oh yeah, just all.
I bet that was stressful though at the time. That seems like very stressful.
No, I loved it.
You loved it?
And it was like,
I think it would be fun too.
I think it'd be really fun. It's a good team building activity if you ever want to like take the day off.
Pressure
and have
test
your
my
Yeah,
team.
pressure test them. And I remember it was like, I had only been there for 3 weeks and they had me like pitch and present the idea. It was terrifying.
Yeah.
But I did it and it was super fun.
That's really neat. So you have lots of experience on the sales front, and out of necessity and also just knowledge gaining, you were like, this is helping me position myself in a way that is as advantageous as possible.
Yeah.
You were equating like my ability to sell and close is a direct indicator of business success.
Yeah, I think it's like business success, but it's also like validating that the services or the product that I provide, there's a need for it. I'm not just
You're not just fucking around.
being like, oh, I have a great business idea, therefore like no, I think sales is a validation that you are solving a problem for customers. And ultimately, like, I believe we work for people, not companies. And I like to connect with people and truly understand what are you struggling with? And like, you probably know this too, when you pitch business, like you're providing a solution that they can't articulate or deliver on.
100%. That for me, so I didn't like sales at first. It was actually my least favorite part of my job. And I was very uncomfortable on sales calls. And I don't think I spoke the most confidently. And actually I remember thinking, this is something I want to offload as soon as I can. I want somebody else to come in and sell, which does not, in hindsight, make sense for my personal business model.
Right, when you are the business.
When I'm the business.
Right.
And obviously now that the agency is live, that's a little different. But my clients love to know that I am a part of the process and I am touching their work and I am a part of their story too. That's a part of what they're paying for. And over time, I realized the more practice I got, not in selling, but in serving, in actually creating the product, the process that I was selling, and putting together a package that over time it took finessing that I thought was the best solution to my client's problems, which is very different than a solution to a client's problems.
Right.
I was talking about my dreamy client. So there was figuring out who my dreamy client is, and then me figuring out, well, how do I take my magic and bottle it up into the best package imaginable?
Right.
That just simply takes time. You can't just, that's not something that can be prescribed to you. You could be a brand designer and your process and your dreamy client is going to drive you to a completely different service platform or service packages or whatever than what I do, even though we're in the same industry.
Right.
And that was really hard for me to just accept. So that takes time, which is hard. And until I felt confident, like truly confident in what those packages were, I didn't feel good about selling.
Totally. It's all about positioning and how you're, and again, you don't know it until you do a little bit of trial and error. You have like a really great client, whatever you're dreaming, and then you have a really bad client. And I think
I was just as informed by my clients I didn't like, or clients that fired me, or clients that I fired, or it didn't work out. Like, they were just as strong of informants in my process and ability to sell well as my dreamy clients were.
Totally. And I think the best way to figure out if you have the right client is just like look at your past client roster, and like I would even go back and interview them and ask them, like, you know, what did I solve for you? What did I do differently that someone else on your team or a different agency couldn't do? Like, your closest clients are going to be the most informing ones. They're going to give you a clear understanding of what you did for them in a way that you may not think, because you've positioned yourself one way, but people interpret it differently.
And those are just loaded sound bites.
Right.
Those are just the little nuggets of information that I would hear and say, oh my gosh, because to me, what I was helping solve for my clients was just like a very natural, I was like, oh, duh, of course this is why it is the way it is.
Right.
I didn't even necessarily have the language to explain, because it was very much so like a gut, instinctual, very creative, right? And so my clients, my previous clients leaving reviews, or even not even leaving reviews, when they're like actually assessing and giving feedback throughout the design process, they're spoon feeding me these tidbits of information of like, oh my God, you're right. That is what I'm doing. Like, thank you for giving me the language to explain that to somebody else.
They're going to give you the messaging for you.
Yes, because I understood it in my head innately. I couldn't necessarily articulate it because I was like, well, of course you need this, like, duh. But that doesn't sell anything. So it was really helpful for me to take these sound bites from clients where I was creating my best work that I was the most proud of. And then I bundled that up into conversations I would have on sales calls. And really it wasn't until that point that then, now I'm actually very energized by sales calls.
Yes.
I love the initial beginning chase. It's super sexy to me. Do you think it's sexy?
Sales. Oh yeah. When you're just like pushing and I'm like, okay, yep, let's get it, sign the contract. Yep. It's just, that's the sales mentality of just the chase of a new opportunity.
And I think too, the reason I truly like it as much as I do is tying back to how you started. I know I'm about to help them. This is so like, I'm truly just so excited for them. Like, oh my God, you are investing in your business. This is going to make everything you do easier. Like, I believe that to my core. And so me signing on a new client, just like, I'm just so excited for them, because
you know what you're able to do.
I truly know the impact is going to be so great. It's going to make their job easier. It's going to help them close easier. I fucking love that for them.
I would say too, my business coach has said this to me, and she says, when you think about sales, sure, you're talking about what you can provide to them, but the biggest difference is how are they going to feel after they've worked with you? And I think you're a good example, because I knew when I wanted to go through my rebrand, I wanted to work with you because I know that you take brands, and it's not, I didn't want to go to you just for a logo. I wanted to like completely create an experience that when people come to my site, they like feel something that they haven't seen. And that's all the feedback I've gotten. That's when leads have come in. It's like this branding experience. I wanted them to feel something when they saw their brand. I also didn't want to feel like overwhelmed by the process. I was like, you understand what I'm going for. Please just take it and run with it so that I don't have to worry about it and that I know I'm in good hands.
Which is dreamy client galore over here, because you told me what your goals were, and we didn't do strategy together. You had already done strategy. Normally I do strategy in scope for my clients because they don't necessarily come prepared with that. But you had strategy already established. That was my business coach and I, we had like mapped that out, because I didn't realize that like that's where I was struggling, is I was trying to serve everybody all the time, because it took me a year to figure that out. Which is normal.
Right. And then once we got clear about like, what are my goals? What is the like core values I want to embody in a brand? And then how do I get a designer to take that and blow it up into a full brand experience? And you empowered me to do that, which is where I feel I have the most space, and why I love the dreamy clients that I love is I can just do what I know how to do based on what I've decided makes the most sense for my clients, based on 10 years of data of this working. And so
that is so exciting because not only do I get to run a process that just is natural for me and organic, which is the best for a creative.
Oh, yeah.
But then the work that we produced together, because you had to provide feedback, was something that you're very proud of and I'm very proud of and is converting and is hitting the mark and
Is
got
disrupting,
you
right.
disrupting and got you placed in a magazine and other things and got you business. Like all of those goals that you had associated, I can now say those things confidently on my next sales call.
Yep. Here's the case study. Here's a case study. Stories. Stories are what sell. And I think about
and it's real. I'm not making it up.
Right. It's not a fable.
She's sitting right here. I'm actually going to just send this episode. This is my future sales call.
I was just going to say, I'm not being held hostage, I swear.
The second time we've had hostage references.
I know, it's not funny.
Season 2, questionable.
Right? And I think about like when I think about how my clients want to feel, I always tell them it's like, you feel like you have somebody on your side because it's lonely at the top when you're a founder. You feel like you can make lonely. You feel like you can make hard decisions. They feel relieved that like someone understands what's going on in their business operationally and that they don't have to do it alone and that's what I'm here for. And I think a big part about sales that I think you and I probably both have in a very similar vein is I'm very upfront where it's here's what I offer, here's how I work. But my end goal is that you are successful. And regardless of who you choose, this is what's going to make me different. But I'm going to be upfront if I make a mistake. There's certain parts of the business I don't understand. If I find an issue during my process, like I'm going to call it out. My prices are what they are. If pricing's an issue, that's okay. Like I'm not going to shoot down competition. I was up against another company and I said, I know them. They're great. If you work with them, great. As long as you hire somebody,
right?
That's the best end goal for what I do because I want more businesses to succeed and I want more businesses to make more money.
And that, as an aside, that's abundance mindset. And we talk about that a lot. There's business and there's room for all of us. And I think that can feel a little woo-woo, squishy. However,
but that's not fear.
It alleviates the fear, which to me helps the selling.
Totally. I'm not going to like force you to work with it. Right. I'm not going to force you to work with me.
Oh, but you should hire me because I'm way better.
Yeah. And I think that's what people think. It's like you having to tell people how great you are. It's actually the opposite. It's you asking your clients, what's the biggest challenge you have? What are your goals next year? How do you work? When are you looking to have this project done the next 3, 6, 9 months? That's going to let you know, are you even available for them?
Totally.
Are they available? Do they have the budget for it? Like there's those obvious things, but I also think being really clear on a sales call on like what you're going to provide for them, what are the next steps, and what my secret sauce is that I've found successes is when you're going to follow up with them.
This is something that you do. I will say it. You are an aggressive follow-upper.
Yes. Oh yeah. I am
not. I want to learn, what is your formula? I feel like you have a form. Do you have a formula?
It's like, it depends. It varies, I think, depending on the type of client.
What would you, I want to tell us.
I would say I believe you can never follow up enough. You follow up until you get an answer, and it's very clear when you follow up. I think people are afraid of being annoying. I hear that all the time from women.
Same. That's very similar in the marketing space.
I don't want to bother them. No, you have inquired me. Therefore, I'm going to continue to follow up very politely until I get an answer. I get an answer no matter what. I've never had a warm lead ever ghost me. I've always gotten an answer.
I've been ghosted. I'm going to tell a story next about being ghosted.
I've never been ghosted. I get an answer. And for me, it's you have the call, you follow up with a recap of next steps, and then the secret is I go, hey, Sarah, if I don't hear back from you by next Wednesday, I'm going to follow up.
So I say that on my sales calls. I don't do the recap. I'll do the sales call. I will let them know you can expect a proposal from us by X date.
Yes.
And on the call, I say, in that proposal recap, if we haven't heard from you, there will be a link for you to schedule, like to self-schedule. And then if we haven't heard from you, we've set up the next appointment right away. And then if we haven't heard from you, I'll reach out or someone from my team will reach out by whatever. That's all a part of like the conversation I have on that initial call and is in that proposal email.
Yep. And I think that's great. There's a psychology of telling people a day because they'll either respond before then or it's telling them to make a decision before you follow up with them. And then if there's a scenario where someone's like, hey, I'm not ready until Q2, I go, fantastic. I'm going to reach out to you in mid-March. And I put a reminder to email me at the beginning of March to send so-and-so an email. So there's just always these reminders. Or if someone isn't responding, I email them every week or every other week until I get a response from them. And usually it's like, hey, we're not ready. Hey, I'm so sorry. I've been sick.
Life happens, which is
Totally.
normal.
And that's why you follow up. It's never personal.
It's never
and I
personal.
have never had a scenario where someone's like, you're following up with me too much. I usually get like, thank you for being so persistent.
I agree.
Thank you for helping me put this to the top of my inbox. Like, people are busy. And like,
Yes.
you are not the most important person
Totally.
in these people's lives.
And
right?
you're not their sole business activity. That's
Correct.
the other thing too, is that I really don't take personally. Branding and a rebrand or a web build, yes, is so important in a business. However, that's not what they do full time.
No, it's just
My
a project
clients-
to them.
Right. It's just a project. It's just another thing on their to-do list, to be completely honest.
Yeah, you need to make it easy for them to make a decision. And I've found, like, Brene Brown says this, I live by this.
Oh
Clear
God,
is
she's like my
yes.
deity.
Clear is kind, unclear is unkind. Like, it doesn't matter if it's like,
That's a tough one for me.
really, I'm
well,
very clear about just expectations, timing, budget,
Yes.
and then we can talk about negotiation in a second.
It
But go
took
on.
me a long time to accept unclear as unkind.
Yeah.
I was very wishy-washy in my process. I was like, you can get feedback back. I was trying to be so,
You wanted to deliver. You wanted to be clients are happy no matter what.
yes, I wanted, like, we can do what works best for you. And I realized, again, this came with learnings over time. What was best for them was saying, this is due on Friday. I'm going to get this to you on Monday. You owe this to me on Friday. Oh, and also, if you don't give it to me on Friday, there's a fee associated with that.
Oh, with
Them
with
being-
getting paid too. Everyone should have a late fee.
Them being
clause.
held accountable was the best thing I did for my clients.
Yes.
Because then their project gets done faster. And that's my responsibility. Getting their project done is my responsibility, not their responsibility. They've got other shit to do.
Right.
So by me being very firm on my delivery dates of this is when
Yep.
feedback is done, and sometimes I even say like by noon or whatever.
You did that with me, and you know what that does though?
Did you like that?
I loved it because it stopped me from spiraling on decisions that don't matter. Like design decisions
just
that
validating.
don't matter.
I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, but you don't have to, like, there were some things where it's like that, yep, that's good. Like it forces them to make a decision faster instead of having to like give them more. Because the more time you give somebody, the more like
They take
nitpicky,
it.
yeah, they'll
That's
get.
the thing. They're going
Especially
to
with
take the
design. Mm-hmm.
whole time. And that's what I learned. And you know what? They probably weren't looking at it until that day.
Correct. So then, yeah, and I think like
And that's helping nobody. That's really hard for my team to manage.
totally.
And it's really hard for the client. And I just want to make it as easy as possible.
Feedback is such a pain in the ass in the design
hard.
world, and it can spiral. But if you're upfront and clear, like, hey, if you want to move fast, you have to move fast.
Yes.
Not just me.
Yes.
I'm not held to a standard where I'm moving fast, but you get to move 2 weeks behind.
So now that is very
Mm-hmm.
apparent in how we structure sales calls and contracts is and being clear communicators
Mm-hmm.
straight up. This is the expectation if you're signing on with us. This is
Yep.
what you need to do.
Yep.
And we shouldn't start this until you can commit to that.
Yeah, until you're
Where
ready.
Previously, I'd be like, it's fine, blah, blah, blah. I was so wishy-washy. And
Yep.
guess what? I fucked everyone up. Everyone got fucked in that
But
scenario.
I think, again, that's part of the upfront communications. Like, I always tell people, like, when I walk through my core values, I was like, commitment, like, this doesn't work if you don't. So it's like, you have to be ready, because if I'm going to keep you on track and I'm going to be that honest friend or honest business person, that if you're not going to show up, this isn't going to work. I'm not going to throw a
Yes.
system at you and tell you it's going to solve your problems. That's a lie. Like, you have to transform along this process. And if you don't, like,
That's on you.
then you just spent money.
Right.
And it didn't work. Or if you don't give real feedback in a realistic time, you're not going to be happy with the end result because you didn't show up when you needed to.
Right.
So clear communication is a big one. I would say, like, when you're going to invoice somebody, and again, getting paid is a huge thing with the sales cycle. I put in a late fee clause and I trigger reminders. Some people think it's obnoxious, but I get paid.
No, same.
Nobody's
we have a late
never
clause
not paid me except
too.
one time, and they did pay me.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big one I think people are afraid of. But You just have a, every X amount of days this is late, you need to pay. Like, that's just upfront.
And that was another thing that I was uncomfortable with, is putting clauses like that in my contracts. And we've talked about this before. My clauses in my contracts internally are named after the clients that taught us we needed those clauses.
Right. And
this is the XYZ clause because they paid so late this time, it was causing all of these problems. Or this is the XYZ clause because we couldn't get a hold of them to get feedback, and it derailed the whole project, which was bad for my team and their team. Like, we take those learnings and then have adjusted our contracts. But that late fee clause is a game changer, because when you put it in the contract and you're upfront about it, they're agreeing to it, right?
Yep.
They're agreeing to it. So when it happens, for me, you're able to reduce the resent that comes out of it, which produces better work and a better working relationship. It's just, you're being favorable and kind to everyone involved.
Correct. You're just paying your bills on time, which again, that's something you will sort out at the beginning.
Regardless of if I'm getting paid, I'm paying my team on time.
Correct.
So it's like you're the client that's either creating a cash flow problem for me, which happened this summer. It was kind of like a crazy moon thing. I heard of multiple women in business who were like, oh my God, I've had these 3 clients pay me late. And like, I was like, oh my gosh, me too.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, me too. And then the client's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It was like, was there like a hyper crazy retrograde happening?
I think it might have been just a busy summer.
Seasonal something crazy happened. But that caused real cash flow problems in my business. And the work was done and the contracts were signed. Like, I knew the cash was coming. But that was stressful.
Absolutely. And
I knew I was covered
because
it was agreed upon in my contract.
Correct.
And then it just becomes a factual, emotionless conversation.
Yeah, like, hey, there's a late fee.
Hey, just as a reminder, if this payment doesn't come through by the 15th or whatever it is, you've agreed to these terms, and we will have to enforce this as of next Friday,
just
or like whatever.
with your credit card.
Right.
I mean, this isn't any different than any sort of payment you have.
And it's just an emotionless, basic conversation.
Yeah, it's the principle of just, and again, that's a good relationship, which like stems back to the beginning of a sales conversation. You are interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you. So there's a couple of things. There's the like clear communication on what you provide, what your process is, what problem you're solving. And then there becomes the piece of like presenting your value and how much you're going to charge.
Yes.
And I think...
And owning it.
Correct. And I think this takes time, this takes practice. Understanding what you should charge is going to depend on your revenue, the value you provide, how much you want to make an hour, the services. Like, this is all going to be
your lifestyle.
Experimental. Correct.
You can Google like basic how to price myself. There's some simple, what I would say are very starting
like baselines.
Points.
Baselines. Benchmark yourself.
Build up from there.
Absolutely. And anytime someone pushes back, which we've all had people push back on our rates, never take it personally. Everything is negotiable in my mind. I negotiate things all the time, and it's never personal. It's just everybody has a budget they're trying to stay within. And anytime I've gotten pushback, or sticker shock is my favorite word they use, because it's like insulting at first, and then I'm like, okay, they want to get a deal. I always say, well, what is the range? What's the range you're trying to stay within? And if people are pushing back, I always say, well, this is what I need to provide the value you're looking for. It's always about value. It's always about, in order to get the value I'm providing to transform your business. It's not me personally. It's the value I'm bringing to transform your business. Here's what I can do. If you want to stay within this range, I cut these 2 things from your project. I'm never cutting and leaving the same project. I know that sounds obvious, but I think we discount ourselves, but still offer the same project. And then what that tells the client is, oh, they were overcharging me. Why were they overcharging me and offering the same project? So like, it's a game. Sometimes it's just better to have a conversation, but just know what you're willing to negotiate down and what's not negotiable. Because if they hit a limit, you just go, I can't do that. I can't do that, and I'm happy to refer you to somebody who can. And then that's it.
And that's the conversation I have. I am unwilling to negotiate out of my core.
Right. What's the threshold you're willing to negotiate down?
And it is very rare. It is very rare that I would make an exception to that. So it's like, I knew you had good strategy. That's different. I don't allow my clients to come in with their own strategy.
Right.
Our relationship is different.
Totally.
And so I have a standard of, and same with our websites are a really good example. It is very rare that my team will design a web experience if we didn't do the branding. Why?
Totally.
I can't build a house on a shit foundation. The house is going to fall.
Correct.
So we do an assessment for any client that wants to have web design done by the agency that we didn't do the branding because, well, is your branding serving the right client? What was the strategy behind? Why did you pick this versus why did you pick that?
Oh,
like,
and then
I
that's
don't
time
know.
that just, spirals.
Exactly. And so those are some of our standards where we'll just, it's a flat and very easy conversation. And then I say, I can help you find somebody that might be able to be a better partner for you on this.
But you know what that's a good example of? That's a good example of a service-based business that has like a really clear package of like, this is what we offer because you have a team, you know what their rates are. This is like, in order for this to be profitable, this is what we need to do.
Exactly.
I have flexibility in the work that I do because it's just me and my scopes are all over the place. So there's some
different business
projects,
models.
right? So like I will always start my projects with like a quick assessment that's like a couple weeks because then I decide if I even want to work with them before they sign a big contract and then they see what they're getting in return and then we move forward. So depends on your business. I say if you have a number that like this is non-negotiable because you're paying people, you have a fee, you know how long it takes you to get it done, it's profitable, like that's a no-brainer.
You can say yes to that.
Right, that's a no-brainer.
And that's the power of, like you said, that upfront communication and owning the process how you want to own it. You are the business owner. You get to decide what you want to say yes and what you want to say no to.
Totally.
It's the magic of being in charge of what you're doing every day.
Right. And the only way you truly master your sales pitch is by having a couple bad ones, having some really good ones that close, someone that don't close. Oh, this is a good piece too. If someone doesn't work with you, ask them why. Ask for feedback. I always do. If I say, hey, you know, why didn't this work, X, Y, and Z? And they'll give you feedback. Sometimes it's like, we don't have the budget. Is it money or is it like timing? Like, get feedback. Like, there's no harm in asking because then you have more information the next time you pitch so that you do get somebody to close.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty important. Those are important data points to collect along the way that, again, inform your ability to confidently communicate your message.
Absolutely.
And that's, like I said, when sales became easy for me is when it was something that I could clearly articulate.
Right. And that takes time. Like, you'll just be okay with the process. You're going to like have some projects where you're like, wow, I vastly undercharged for that. Like, we've all been there, but we wouldn't have known until we did that project. And we're like, okay, what would I do differently?
100%.
Like, that's the only way you know.
Have you ever had any wildly bad sales calls? Or like that went awry, or you're like, what is happening here?
I think I've had sales calls where it just feels like a personal conversation where I'm like, are we even going to work together? Or do we need to follow up and have another conversation? That to me, that was a sign of a good relationship. It's never been bad necessarily, but I am like people first. Like, I want to know, am I going to get along with you?
I agree.
Are you willing to change? Are you willing to transform your brand? Like, I'm more interested in the relationship first than the sales pitch. But I've probably stumbled or like bombed or just was like, this wasn't that good of a call. But yeah, I don't know.
I feel like I know within the first like 5 minutes, honestly, if I'm like, this person's for me or this person isn't for me.
I know. Yeah.
And I've gotten to a point too in my business where, based off of my pricing model and based off of how I've positioned myself in the marketplace, that most of my leads coming in are actually very well self-qualified. Yep. Which is fantastic because I'm hopping on a phone with somebody who has been able to create the right assumption on their own that I am for them and they are for me.
Correct. They've kind of vetted themselves.
They've vetted themselves.
Yes.
And that, again, is the power of a really great branding and a strong website that helps them make those decisions for themselves, because I'm not having shitty leads come into my world.
Correct. And that
saves my time and it makes my sales calls easier.
Think about the power of a lead form. Like, I vet out people because I require them to have a budget range. And like, if they're ready in the next 3, 6, or 9 months, like, that's vetting them right there for me. So like, have a list of questions that are like non-negotiable when someone schedules a call with you or wants to meet you. Like, or if someone's like, hey, can I hire you? Be like, yes, please fill out this form so I can capture your information. Instead of like people just willy-nilly asking for your time, like, require them to qualify themselves.
Yes. That is such an amazing sales funnel tool as you're working them through the sales funnel. Like, have them self-select all up here. And then when it's time for you to close, that's when you're hands-on with them.
You can decide. You've just made a really, really educated decision on if you're going to not take more of your time to determine if it's worth talking to them.
How many sales calls do you do with one client typically before the client's closed?
I would say It varies depending if they're in-state or out-of-state. I would say in-state takes a little bit longer because I want to do a phone call and then I want to meet them in person. So I'd say like 1 to 3.
Okay.
I would say if they're out-of-state, it's like 1 or 2.
I'm a one sales
It's
call.
pretty quick depending
closed or
on
not.
just who are the decision makers. And that's a key piece too.
That's
Who
a
is
good-
going to sign the checks? Are they on the call? You always want to have a decision maker present.
That's a
and
good
you always
point.
just ask like, hey, are you going to be the one that needs to sign off on this contract? If not, can we loop in so-and-so?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I mentioned a story I said I would tell later. I've had a client,
Oh,
a
yes.
prospect, and this drives me bonkers when service-based prospects are trying to hire me because they understand how shitty this is.
Oh, no, is this me?
This is Jordan that I'm talking about.
I want it for free. Don't ask for free shit.
3 separate times have engaged, and this is like over years, have engaged on like urgent needs.
Oh, I'm stressed. I'm stressed
And
by this
we've
already.
we've had 3 fantastic sales calls.
Okay.
And this is like, these are kind of like different scopes of projects. And one scope we took on, one scope we didn't take on. And then this was like a totally new scope. Hey, this has happened and the business is changing so much and we're doing this. And follows up, like, can you give me that proposal? I'm like, dude, we just talked. Follow up, ghost.
Yeah, radio silent.
And I'm like, okay, this is as red flag as it gets. You are not as serious about this as you're pretending to be serious about. And that to me is so inconsiderate
Absolutely.
of my time,
Yes.
my team's time. And so I share that to, one, be a reminder to me because I also hire service providers to help with my business. I understand that can happen sometimes.
Absolutely.
And-
But 3 times, I mean, your lack of planning is not my emergency. Period.
Oh, that is so real.
And like those people, you know what that is. That's a reactionary execution response. If something's going awry in my business, maybe branding will fix it. And I get it. I can be impulsive where I'm like, oh, I should like go hire this person, but they probably didn't have the capacity.
Like, just don't ask me to hustle if you can't show up.
Correct, that's the
just
commitment.
so disappointing.
Yeah, and to
That's so
me, the
disappointing.
response is like, this is our typical process.
Right.
If you can't follow along, then it's not a good fit for me.
Right. We'll see if they show up again, and we'll see.
If they book,
We'll
I'm
see
excited.
how I proceed. I mean,
If you
I
even
told my
decide,
team, I was like,
yeah.
I kind of feel like that's a no-go. Like 3 strikes, you're out.
That's a lot of strikes.
That's a lot of times that like
Yeah.
I took on a sales call and we prepare all of our proposals, live for the client so that my team is doing that. And then the email time and the admin time and the follow-up time. That's a lot.
You spent a lot of money.
I've spent a lot of money, right?
For nothing to be returned.
Where I feel like my dreamy client, it's a 1 sales call.
It's signing the
Literally,
contract.
It's signing the contract. They're coming on for a logistical, like, when can we start?
Yeah.
Not a, Sarah, tell me about how this works. Like, they've already done their research. They know
Right.
how it works. They understand the pricing because I'm transparent about that.
Right.
As transparent as I could be. Obviously, every project might, feel a little
There's
bit
a
different.
variance, right.
Right. So it's fascinating. But I do have to remind myself, I definitely can be sometimes the person who is also slow on the other end of service providers that I'm hiring out. So I try to remind myself, what feels shitty when people do it to you?
How do you
Don't
want to
do it to other
correct.
people.
How do you want to be treated when you hire
want to be treated?
somebody?
Okay, 3 key takeaways, because we talked about a lot, but really they all
Yes.
stem in like closing the sale, how to not have sales feel schemy.
Yeah, and I think it's clear is kind when you're clear, and it's not necessarily about how great you are, but it's clear on what you're providing, what your process is, what your pricing is, and what they can expect. I think that's a big one, being clear.
Representing your product as the genuine solution to their problem is number 2 to me.
Yeah, how you position yourself, and it's
being confident in that. And that frankly takes time. So if you don't feel confident in that right now, that's totally okay.
Yeah, talk to your clients, talk to your best clients about it, what worked, what didn't. Like, just learn and kind of call out what people are hiring you for. What are they coming to you for?
Because if you truly believe it, that will be a tangible experience that someone is experiencing from you on a sales call. They'll be getting that information from you naturally because it's clear that you truly believe that. That is a huge selling point naturally.
Totally.
For you, for your products or your services.
Yep. And I would say the third piece can show up in a couple different ways, but you can qualify your leads through a lead form on your site, through the branding, through the messaging, through the questions you need answered by the client to decide if you even hire them. So make sure you have some sort of process, whether it's 3 steps to know if someone's qualified to work with you.
That's great.
And that's a big one.
That's a really great one.
Let's go close some business.
Let's go close some sales. Comment on Instagram, leave notes. Where can people leave notes?
I'm
Maybe
pretty
we don't
sure-
leave notes.
well,
Can they leave
I'm-
comments on the platform?
In Spotify, you can send us questions within the Q&A section. That's
like a new feature.
Yeah, it's a new feature. If you use Spotify, you can send us questions. DMing us, I feel like on Instagram's the best way to find us. Just comment, let us know, what are you going to do to close some business? Or how much do you want to close this year?
How are sales going?
Yeah.
Like and follow, subscribe. That's the biggest thing you can do to help the Refund grow, is subscribing on YouTube and also where you listen to your favorite podcasts. You can watch us on both Spotify and on YouTube, which is really cool.
Yes, we have
because
cute outfits on. We've been
at
planning
us.
outfits for every episode.
Yeah.
Please watch us.
It's exhausting. We hope that sales become a little bit easier and a little less schemy for you. I'm ready to go close some deals. You?
Let's get some coffee.
Cheers.
Cheers.